Welcome back to Gary's in the Shed. You know that question, what would you do if you won the lottery? If you suddenly came into a lot of money? I know what I would do with at least some of the money. I'd be collecting old master paintings. And in this episode, I'll tell you why. And you'll meet the people who rescue fine art. I have no interest in boats or watches or fancy cars. My car is an old Land Rover with 120,000 K on the clock. But if I did strike it lucky, my choice would be to supercharge a hobby of mine in finding old paintings from the 17th and 18th centuries, collecting old masters, as they are called. It can be a fascinating hobby, not just for the art itself, but in the search for the story behind the painting, its history, the artist, and the subject. And it doesn't need to cost as much as you might think. To get started, you don't have to spend a fortune, as I hope I can prove later in this episode. I hope. A big part of this hobby is the detective work to go to prove the identity of the painter and when the work was done. And the quality of that investigative work is what will mostly determine the actual value of the picture. The art market calls it attribution. Of course, the superstars of the old masters market are way out of the reach for ordinary folks like us, often returning with costs like tens of millions of dollars. But today, you could buy a good original oil painting for a couple of $1,000s, about the price of a fashionable print. Now, it won't be a Rembrandt, but there is something cool about having an old master hanging on your wall. And I've found the research, hunting down the story of the picture, the best part of the whole process. I've been on the internet looking at old masters auction sites, keeping an eye out for something with potential but not too expensive. There's one here that caught my eye. It's only a tiny thing, just 28 by 21 centimetres, with St. Catherine as the subject. We'll see how that goes at the auction. The reason I'm curious is I think that might look quite nice with just a clean. The estimate for the auction is 800 to 1,000 euros. In the old days, my Angelica would spend that on a pair of shoes. My adventure in exploring old masters started about 10 years ago, when I first met our dear friend Angelica Pediconi, a restorer and conservator of fine art based in London. Curious about the world of old masters, I bought a painting at Sotheby's by a 17th century painter called Francesco Rosa. Here's what it looked like in the auction catalogue, but it was very quickly transformed by the work of Angelica. Here she is, working on the painting at a client event held by Christie's, ironically the arch competitor to Sotheby's. And here's what the painting looked like after the cleaning. I like this picture. It's Semiramis called to arms, with the Queen of Assyria interrupted by news of a Babylonian revolt. The comb in the Queen's hand is important because she declared she would not finish combing her hair until she had led her army into battle and put down the revolt. And now we're in Angelica's London studio, feeling right at home here. It's a place filled with all the tools of the restorer's trade, alongside a lot of very valuable art. I'm not able to show you many of the paintings, but here there have been works by artists like Van Dyck and Rembrandt. Among the tools here is a custom-built mechanism for repairing damaged wooden panels. These 600 or 700-year-old pieces of wood often warp and split. So Angelica's colleague Fabio designed and built this sophisticated clamping system to reshape the panel while the fresh glue is drying.
The other. So, in this situation, I can put the glue, let's say, along here and the other side quickly and rejoin together the bits like that.
It's a tricky business as Fabio applies just the right amount of pressure to flatten and straighten the picture. And they've been able to save some very important works of art as a result. Meanwhile, Angelica is doing some cleaning of another painting I'd bought, a portrait attributed to an 18th century painter from Florence called Andrea Soldi. He worked in London in the 1700s, painting British aristocrats on their return from the Grand Tour, a tradition among the dukes and viscounts who'd gone on a cultural pilgrimage across Europe and all the way into Egypt.
There might be some previous retouching that I am removing, which was quite unsympathetic. So it is better to reveal the original pigment of the lips with this slight red velatura in the middle that we couldn't see before. It's quite nice.
Now, we don't know who this gentleman is, but the search for clues about the subject and the history of the painting goes on.
So we now believe that this painting was at auction at Christie's in 1939. We even have the number of the lot, 89. Sometimes you have full entries thanks to this archivist and thanks to the archive at Christie's and Sotheby's, and that's very important for us. And we get this from the back, not even looking at it from the front.
This research is all about what people in the art business call attribution. And it's great to work with someone with the skills of Angelica, who's been working in this world all her adult life.
I came across a friend of my mother, actually, that was a restorer, conservator, and she showed me her studio, and I realized that being a conservator, restorer of easel painting could, join together this discovery, the sublimation, the transformation of objects, because you rediscover and, of course, you clean them. So I decided to become a art conservator, art restorers of easel paintings, and I went to school. There is a school in Rome, which is quite thorough, and I also studied history of art at the university, because at the time these were two very separate careers. So the art historians actually were looking at conservators, the restorers, a bit like this, that's not.
They were just tradesmen.
Yes, exactly, like tradesmen. And in fact, at the time, this diploma, which was, very intensive in conservation and restoration, wasn't a diploma. Laurea was just a diploma. And I had to hide from my professor at the university, La Sapienza in Rome, that I was doing the exams in conservation and restoration. Because exactly there was this idea that, you're going to dirt a bit your hand, or you're just a trade. But I always thought that it was so important, to look at an object with both eyes as an art historian. So, studying, through the styles and being able also to do the research. And, of course, my art history diploma helped me for that. But I was very interested in having the objects in my hand. And I said this idea of transformation and sublimation. And I loved, chemistry, and there is a lot of chemistry.
So you weren't afraid to get your hands dirty?
I wasn't afraid. I'm very much my hands dirty all the time.
Back to work, this time on another 18th century grand tour portrait that is telling a clear story about this man's journey.
I know from experience that this color, this gray, is really the color of dirt.
It's not paint, thankfully.
It's not paint, thankfully.
It's amazing how the color comes out so quickly like that. Watching Angelica work is hypnotic. It's painstaking work, getting the materials and the chemicals just right, and hours of focus.
We can tell that he is one of the Grand Tour characters that were living in Italy or coming to Italy to have an education, and he is holding a little vase. It could be Roman, Greek, or Etruscan, and also for the fashion, because he's quite fashionable in a way, in the way that his hair and also the shirt. And we also can tell that it's an 18th century canvas because the canvas is quite thin. So these are little technical details that are, being revealed while you are cleaning it or you are restoring it. Many thanks to Angelica and Fabio at their studio in London. I hope you found that as interesting as I did. Meanwhile, if you recall, I did say earlier in the episode I'd been looking for some old paintings on the internet. Well, I did join the Finarte auction live online, and I did have some success. Maybe a little too much success, some might say. I ended up with 3 paintings after commissions amounting to a grand total of €3,000. Here's how it went.
Il lotto numero 30 è seguace di Santo Ferraco,
Our first lot,
è una
number
Madonna
30,
orante,
a Madonna,
e per questo
apparently from
lotto
the
partiamo
19th
da
century.
850 a 900. 9,50 ora. Per me 9,50, la prossima è 1.000. Io sono a 9,50, vediamo se qualcuno offre 1.000 euro. 1.000 euro, grazie,
That
ce l'abbiamo su
was my
Finarte. 1.000 euro. E per lei su Finarte. Qualcuno vuole superare con 1.100? Aggiudico a lei su Finarte allora per 1.000 euro per la prima, per la seconda 1.000 euro e lo diamo sulla piattaforma numero 1.
We got that one.
Rare.
And now, the one I wasn't planning on. It's an 18th century picture of Mary Magdalene.
Tutti d'accordo?
Let's try
400
anyway.
e 50, io ho 500 e 5,50. Quindi la prossima per lei è 600 se vuole. 5,50 ce l'ho io sul libro. Se vuole può fare 600. 600, grazie, io sono fuori col libro ora. 600 euro, buona per lei. 600 euro. Per lei su Finarte. Io sono fuori col libro, quindi gli altri se vogliono possono fare 6,50. Altrimenti lo aggiudico al cliente che ci segue su Finarte per 600 euro. Per la prima, per la seconda, 600 euro. Lo diamo su Finarte, piattaforma 1. L'807, scuola veneta del secolo XVIII.
The St. Catherine picture I was interested in.
Piattaforma numero 2. 800 euro, li abbiamo in piattaforma 2. La prossima per chi vuole, allora 8,50.
I'm thinking.
8,50 è la successiva, 800 euro lo aggiudico allora in piattaforma numero 2 se non vedo rilanci. No, 800 ce l'ho sulla piattaforma 2, su Finarte dovete fare 8,50.
Oops,
800
muck that up.
piattaforma. Se vuole può fare 8,50, grazie, 8,50 su Finarte. Vediamo se la piattaforma 2 rilancia. Siamo a 8,50, piattaforma Finarte.
Come on, ma'am.
Siamo a 850 euro per lei su Finarte.
Come on.
Posso aggiudicarlo? 8,50 per la prima, per la seconda 8,50.
Look at that, we got it. That's interesting. Okay.
L'8,57.
Well, that was fun. And here they are, the 3 little paintings. They'll be shipped here, and then I'll be seeing them in the flesh for the first time. And we'll be looking carefully at the backs of the paintings, or verso, as the art trade likes to call it. As Angelica pointed out, that's an important part of the detective work. We'll do the big reveal in a future episode and see if we can make them look even better. So, as you can tell, I have a lot of fun with this hobby. Of course, everyone has to work within their own budget constraints. But if, like me, you're not going to be trading in art and you just like the look of a good painting, none of all that stuff about attribution really matters much. You see, the art market is awash with very good paintings with little or no attribution. And as a result, they're relatively affordable. For the past several years, they've been out of fashion and as a result, undervalued. As I said before, getting started doesn't have to cost a fortune, and it's fun. You just never know what you might find. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in another episode of Gary's in the Shed.